Hello there, and thanks for joining me in this video cast for the Fortune card, or in the Rider-Waite deck it's called the Wheel of Fortune. And this is really just a glyph of how the universe works in terms of its ebbs and flows and the energies that keep it in motion. Perhaps what's sometimes lacking in the descriptions of this card is the fact that the central bit here, which doesn't move, is also a very important aspect of the card, because it's that sense of centeredness and stillness which gives us some detachment from the activity of the rest of the card. I found this card a little bit tricky to get to grips with when I was first looking at the Thoth deck, because you've got quite a lot of different figures around the outside here, which are not always immediately clear. But we'll talk about these one by one. So I'm hoping to do a card per week now and get this series finished off. So hopefully we'll be able to get a conclusion to this Thoth series pretty soon. Okay, I'll see you in the next section. Okay, with regards to the position of the Wheel of Fortune on the Tree of Life, it's located between Hesed, which is the fourth Sephiroth, and Netzach, which is the seventh. So Hesed, which is just above the supernal triangle, where you have a lot of spiritual energy coming down, is situated here, and it collects the energy from these three as it comes from B.O.T.A in the lightning strike there. It's associated with bestowing goodness. It's to do with structure, justice, law, but all for the betterment of mankind in its highest aspect. So it's like bestowing goodness on creation, and this just links in with this notion that in the card itself, with Jupiter ruling, that there is a sense that creation acts in our best interests, even though it may not seem that way. This card is quite complex in the sense that it can relate to karmic events of the past. So we're not just looking at the present here, we're looking at the Wheel of Life, and as we know, the Wheel of Life does not just apply to this lifetime. But I'll try and explain more about that in the next section. So that's one aspect of its position on the Tree of Life, and that's trying to act and see life in its highest aspects. Netzach is to do with the emotions, and it's also victory. And it ties in with Hesed in the sense that it's trying to live our lives that will in a way that will fulfill us, so that when we are revolving on this Wheel of Life, we do get something out of it emotionally that is fulfilling. So, I mean, Netzach can also be like drowning in the emotions as well, but we're looking at the major arcana in terms of things in their most purified aspects. So with this card we have a sense of us acting in the best possible way, and also to try and get as much out of life as we can that will emotionally fulfill us, and that life will fulfill other people as well. So it's not just a sense of us trying to get the most of it for what we can get, it's also about service to others. So that sums up the position of the Fortune card on the Tree of Life. I haven't seen that particular description given in many books, so that's basically I've meditated on that, and that's what seems relevant to me with regards to its position there on the tree. Okay, we'll go to the next section, which will be about the Hebrew attribution of this card. The Hebrew association of this card is Kaf, which is spelled K-A-P-H, and Kaf essentially means the palm of the hand or fist, and it's the wheel that turns, it's the hand that turns the wheel rather. We can see on the diagram close up on the Wheel of Fortune that here we have the fist here. This does imply that our destiny is in our own hands in a sense. I'd also just like to mention that the palm of the hand also is related to palmistry, and the lines on the palm are said to be like an imprint of the life path of the soul. So we have this again, the idea of destiny and the Wheel of Fortune, and I'll say for those that are interested, I've got links on in the article on my website, linking to articles on karma and destiny, the fate of the soul, that sort of thing. So for those that want to pursue that, you can just click on the links that are there. The other attribute of this card is the astrological one, which we've mentioned, which is Jupiter, and this essentially bestows growth, expansion, a good fortune. So there is a sense that this card does work for our best interests, even though some lessons in life may be very difficult to fit into that particular framework at the time that we're experiencing them. So perhaps we'll learn a little bit more about the Wheel of Fortune when we and karma and things like that when we look in the next section, which is to do with the symbolism contained in the card. Looking at the symbology of the card, we'll start at the very top here. You have this circle type appearance here. I'll bring the card down, it's not quite in view. That's better. We've got and this is the cosmic clock. This is the universal aspect of life here. And the goddess Nuit, who we see in the Eon card, which is the Crowley equivalent to the Judgment card in the Weight deck. In this cosmic clock we have a 10-pointed star in the middle, and on the outside we have various different shapes and brightness of stars. For instance, some are dark, such as these, and we've got some lighter ones. These ones around the outside are all 5-pointed stars, and that relates to man and the pentagram, because man's fivefold nature. It's the crisis nail, the 5 wounds, which I've got done articles on and that sort of thing. So it's related to man. The number 10 here reflects the 10-pointed star in the middle of the actual wheel of life. So with this card we've got the axiom as above so below. So man is a reflection of God, and God is the highest aspect of man, and that's essentially what the journey through the major arcana is about. It's the fool's journey back to God. I think also relevant is the fact that Crowley says in the Book of the Law that every man and woman is a star. So all of these stars are unique, they're all slightly different from each other, and that represents the uniqueness of our individuality as we incarnate. The number 10 here also refers to a sense of completion. It refers to Malkut here, which is the final Sephiroth, the one that's further away from Keta, and it's the most grounded of energy. So that number 10 implies that this card relates to our everyday world, our most tangible world. Okay, so on to the next bit here. What we'll talk about is these three characters around the wheel itself. So we'll start with the first one here on top, and that's the Sphinx there. These three represent the three gunas, or the three qualities that make up the universe in Hindu philosophy. So Crowley was very much for integrating East and West and just seeing the universality in all of these various different religions and philosophies. I think I've got as my title on my website is Many Voices, One Truth, and this is this would very much cover and describe what Crowley is trying to do in this card. So we'll take the Sphinx first. So the Sphinx is Egyptian. Most of the other characters are Greek. With the Sphinx, it represents the element of sulfur, and sulfur is quite an explosive element. It's got a lot of energy to it. So despite the fact that the Sphinx carries a sword here, which would imply some correspondence with Mercury, in fact it isn't the character that's associated with Mercury. The fact that the Sphinx is related to sulfur also ties it in with the Emperor, because we looked at the Emperor in a previous video. So this is the active part of the creation, the explosive one, the creative bit of the cycle. On to the next character, we've got Typhon here, who carries the inverted ankh, and he has like a serpentine tail here. Typhon is to do with death and stagnation. It's almost the opposite of sulfur, and it's associated with salt, and we saw salt in the Empress. So the fact that he carries an inverted ankh, obviously the ankh represents life, motion, the universe, that sort of thing, and so the fact that it's inverted implies that he contradicts the principles of life. He contradicts moving forward, and he represents that part of our life which can stagnate and not be creative. It represents the times that we are stuck. The serpentine tail links him in with hell, which is essentially a religious connotation for the mind, and the mind obviously cannot see God, so it links in with Hindu philosophy there as well. Okay, we will move on to the third character there, which is probably the most ambiguous one, because he's a hybrid, he's a mixture of two characters, and this character is called Anubis. Again, I've got all these in my notes on the website. So he represents a variation, the simian form of the god Anubis, who normally looks like that. So Anubis is a combination of Anubis and Hermes. Hermes is associated with Mercury, so this is where Mercury comes in. And these two gods are associated with the function of being a psychopump. Now a psychopump is something that acts as a mediator between the living and the dead, and essentially acts as a guide for souls of the dead through the underworld, as we saw in the we saw a little bit of it in the Thoth Hermit card, and also in the Three of Cups. My notes on the Three of Cups also talk about Hades. So Anubis is the Egyptian god of mummification, the weighing of the heart ritual, and therefore, as we saw in the diagram here, it's like the weighing of the heart, and it's some sort of assessment before that soul is passed on. So all the characters in this card are Greek in origin apart from the Sphinx. We also have at the top of the card the Zeus lightning bolts, thunderbolts there. And this links in with Zeus being what's called a demiurge. A demiurge is essentially someone who thinks they're self-created and therefore they don't have anything that's higher than them, but in fact there is much higher than them. So it's like a deluded god. So perhaps the furthest they could get to is Hesed on the Tree of Life here, because this supernal triangle here is all about unity of spirit, where ego dissolves, identity it dissolves, so they would never know anything on the higher aspect of the Tree of Life here. So how does this link in with the meaning of the card? Well, Zeus was known for meddling with the affairs of humans. And you see the thunderbolts coming down from the stars here. So in a sense he's attacking Typhon here, which is the element of associated with salt and stagnation. So it is almost like this the influence of Jupiter and that positivity, that expansion, is trying to get rid of the negative aspects of the wheel and just move our life forward here. And that's basically how that links in with Greek mythology. So he meddles with the karma of men. Fortune in some ways is said to be blind. The wheel sort of spins and stops in random ways which can mess up our lives. But again, this is a very complex subject, and for those that want a bit more information on karma, then as I said, I do have links to that on in the notes. Another thing that gets lost in this card is this triangle here in the background with the eye in the top part there, very similar to this diagram, which is the triangle with the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. So the triangle within the wheel represents the three gunas. And this is a symbol for them, and I mentioned those were part of the Hindu philosophy. And the three qualities, which are to do with the creation. So this central eye here, I think I talked about that at the start, and the fact that that's often missed as being a really important bit, because we have this card does represent life's ebbs and flows, and we need to have some sense of stillness and detachment to be able to make our lives the most productive, which is where things like spiritual practice comes in. So obviously with the Hermit we had this sense of withdrawing to the withdrawing inside to our spiritual calling, the thing that was most relevant to us, and in this card it's more of an external application of that stillness. So this card is very much to do with our day-to-day fortunes, the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, but this all-seeing eye is and that detachment from that process of motion is something which is very important in this card. I think obviously we've also got these spirals here, which again is the energy of the wheel coming forth. Something that I forgot to mention with the fist here, we've got 6 rays coming out. Now the number 6 is to do with the six Sephiroth here, which is ruled by the sun. The sun is to do with the Christ consciousness, the Christ center. It's again it's like the all-seeing eye, which is the third eye here, which is meditated upon, and it's where we see the spiritual light. So the fact that there are six rays there means that it's like it is almost like the will of God, the will of Christ is actually moving that wheel. And I touched upon that again, going back to the original diagram here, which is Hesed and doing things in the greatest good. And so it's all about trying to, when we turn the wheel of our life, that are we turning it in a way that is for our best possible good? Are we making the most of it? Are we taking the most of our opportunities? Are we living out a life that is of a spiritual nature? It's that sort of thing that we need to think about. Is there anything else to do with this symbolism? Yeah, the centre of the wheel there, we've got a little point which is very difficult to see there. The point is associated with Keta and spirit. So the three gunas, or the three qualities, are really just emanations from this point of stillness. So everything in life comes from this point of stillness, which again is what makes this central portion of the wheel so important. And again, this is so often missed in the interpretation of this card. So implied in this is that everything that happens on this wheel of life is God's will, because it just all emanates from that centre. It all emanates from Keta, from God. So we could spend ages discussing karma and things like that, but I think I'm going to stop there. As I say, for those that are interested, there's links on my website in the notes on this particular card to various different articles. So we'll move on to the next section, which is to do with the transition between the Hermit and the Fortune card. The Hermit and Fortune cards have a very strong link to each other, as the Fool moves from the Hermit into the Wheel of Fortune. Because what he's done in the Hermit is he's learnt to be centered and strong within himself in order to follow the true calling and what's the most important thing to him. So that's like an inner centeredness, and it's this sense of being centered that allows us to move into the center of the wheel here and get some detachment from the ebbs and flows of life. So both cards closely related, and by mastering the Hermit within, we're better able to survive the sort of karmic wheel of life when we move out of the inner path and go out into the world. And that's that stage pretty much summarised. Okay, we'll move on to the divination aspects of this card. In terms of its upright position and its divinatory meaning, when we get the Fortune card, or the Wheel of Fortune, it's really reminding us to be optimistic and have faith in the universe, that it will take care of the situation in the best possible way. It could also mean that change is about to happen to us, and soon. So we may need to alter our present course, move things in a different direction, turn the wheel of life in a different way, to ensure that we're creating the best possible outcomes in our life. So if we struggle against the flow of life, then we struggle to ascend the wheel. We get stuck in this Typhon here, or even crushed. So despite this sort of ebb and flow of the wheel, if we are reminded to bring ourselves into the center here and to have a sense of stillness within us, then it's in its upright position, it's telling us that will have a beneficial effect on our life. So there is good fortune with this card. It could mean that there's an opportunity coming our way soon which will present itself, and we need to be ready to take that and grasp that opportunity. It also does imply that it reminds us to go with the flow of life as well. Let good fortune come our way. Being ready to act on unexpected opportunities. And also when times are good, enjoy them, but don't become complacent, because things can change. And then again, when times are challenging, don't be discouraged, because when things seem at their worst, they can often get better. So those are some of the divinatory meanings for this card in the upright position. Now if we turn to this card and look at it in the reverse or ill-dignified position, if this comes up in a reading like this, it could mean that we're not going with the flow of life. Luck is not on our side at the moment. It could be a turn of events that are coming or have been that weren't in our favour. It could also relate to circumstances which are out of our control. We can't get a hand on it. You can't get a grip with the fist on the situation, so it leaves us feeling helpless and powerless. It could also relate to a run of circumstances whereby they just seem to have come out of the blue, and it could be related to poor decisions we made in the past or even in past lives. And again, that equally applies to the upright position, whereby a good fortune and ease in this life can be a result of good decisions in the past, and again karma from past lives. And also this sort of position of the card being reversed, it could mean that it could indicate there's a time of significant stress where we're not really dealing with the events of our life very well. So this is not a time to be taking risks when the card is in its reverse position. To conclude this video, we'll just look at the Celtic cross. So if the fortune appears in the heart of this situation here, it could be it's basically saying that life is changing and we must be ready to act on any favourable opportunities. If it's the crossing card here, it could mean that we're taking too many risks, or even just not going with the flow of life, we're stagnating. Unconscious influences, it could mean that we've got things in the past that have made us scared of change, fearful events that have left their mark, so we're not as outgoing and as free-flowing as what we could be. I won't go through each one here, but short-term future, change and some good luck coming our way, an opportunity for growth, guidance and warning. Don't get caught up in the wheel of life too often. Withdraw yourself to the centre and get some perspective on things. Overall outcome, there will be an excellent opportunity for change in your life for the better. We need to go with the flow, remain centred and focused on what's most important to us, and there'll be a great outcome. So that's the sort of things and qualities that are associated with this card. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks ever so much for your support. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get the next card out in a week's time. Thanks very much. Bye.